Welcome, everybody, to our PDA Town Hall for the last day of November 2025. And we are absolutely thrilled to have as our featured guest this week, really one of the most consistently excellent progressive voices in the country for the past more than quarter century. Thom Hartmann is joining us, and Thom is going to be here to talk about his newest book, The Last American President, which he'll be talking about, and people will be able to pick up through links we're going to put into the chat. And to mention this book, I have to say almost initially, this is not to in any way, um, not observe that his recent series of books, which have been known as the Hidden History series, have all just across the board been really exceptional. And they're really worth picking up. My particular favorite recently was the Hidden History of Neoliberalism. And I think that Thom Hartmann is someone who does a daily radio show 5 days a week. It's one of the most popular talk radio shows in the country, remains so. And his analysis of American society and his understanding of the history of America and the recent economic history of the world is just so absolutely in harmony with PDA. Maybe it shouldn't be surprising that Thom was somebody who was with PDA and a fellow traveler of PDA from the foundation of Progressive Democrats of America. He was very close to our founding executive director, Tim Carpenter. And as I always say about Thom Hartmann, Thom Hartmann and PDA probably are the two sort of taken as institutional forces, as it were. Thom, sorry to institutionalize you for a second, where that really laid the groundwork for Bernie Sanders' run for president in 2016. I was privileged to be a program director at KPFK Radio, and in my capacity there, I made sure that we found a way to bring the Thom Hartmann radio show onto KPFK, and we would run 1 hour out of the 3 hours per day. And one day of the week, at that point, there was a weekly hour that was called, I think by then it was Breakfast with Bernie, or was it Brunch with Bernie? I can't remember. It was Brunch. And that was incredible. And, just even hearing that show, boy, this guy, he really has a message. Anyway, people say he's too marginal. He's way on the left. It was clear as day, and I think it was clear as day to the leadership of PDA that this so-called obscure senator from Vermont really was speaking about issues that were going to connect with the American people. I don't think PDA would have taken the action that it took in launching the Run Bernie Run campaign without awareness of how Bernie sounded on the Thom Hartmann show. And obviously, I'm guessing Thom Hartmann recognized this was a voice that was going to really connect with the American people, and that's what would have launched that. So it really was a partnership there that led to obviously the highest profile action that PDA has taken in its history, and we are happy to say that it transformed American politics. Unfortunately, didn't transform American politics enough, but really brought progressive politics back onto the main stage of American politics, and that's through to today. And with that, I want to say two things right now on other subjects. Very, very important week for PDA, and of course, very important 2 days. If you are unaware, PDA was very involved with supporting Afton Bain's run for Congress in the special election that is taking place on Tuesday in Tennessee's 7th District. It's about a 60-40 Republican district, but the polls show it is neck and neck right now. And PDA endorsed Afton Bain before the primary, and really played a huge role in building infrastructural support for that campaign and producing a victory in the primary. And now we're just going, the word right now for this on this run is contact Mike Fox, volunteer with PDA. We will get you into making phone calls into the district in support of Afton's campaign. And it really can't be overstated how impactful this will be to win a Tennessee district that is a gerrymandered district to be safe for the Republican Party in this special election. I think will have an impact just by itself equivalent to what we saw on the Tuesday a few weeks ago when the Democrats swept the elections across the country. Our chief of staff, Mike Olis, is going to be there on Tuesday night in Nashville. And we're excited, but it's no time to take stock of how great it's gone so far. This is a race that's winnable, and all of us can make a contribution to winning this election. The other thing I have to say is, look, and obviously the election result on Tuesday is going to inform this event, but just in the past few days, I have locked down a space in Los Angeles so that PDA will be having a public forum on December 11th. It's basically going to be the state of the Democratic Party, a progressive perspective. In a sense, it's a continuation of what we did at Progressive Central in Chicago during the DNC in 2024. Obviously, a different political context now. But the reason we're hosting that is because the DNC is having its meetings in Los Angeles, December 10th to the 13th. And of course, I live in Los Angeles, and I couldn't just really sit idly by and have the DNC coming here and not try to put on an event to, try to really present and make clear in what is now a party that is contested between a progressive wing and I think, a very stale moderate wing that is losing public support week by week, but is still sort of largely in control of the party. Certainly, the majority of elected officials are from the moderate neoliberal wing of the party, and there's a lot of confusion about what really does the progressive wing stand for? How do we relate to the party? How do we build up the party in light of how much money influences things and how much less money we have than the moderates? And that's what the focus is going to be. And of course, we will be streaming that event live, and we will have many invitations going out to you. And already, Ro Khanna, John Nichols are going to participate, and we'll see who's in town on the 11th and build up the roster of speakers, etc. So look forward to that. And Thom Hartmann coming up very soon. But first, as always, we have our PDA to-dos for this week. And for that, I hand it over to Mike Fox. Hello, Mike.
Doing a little multitasking there, brother. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Pushing buttons and praying that they click right. In any event, our to-dos this week, gang, as always, number one, revel in the fact that you're surrounded by people who get it here. Each and every Sunday, 4 o'clock Eastern, we are here to, number one, build community. Number two, show solidarity. Number three, get things done over the upcoming week. We'll be tossing into the chat the link to a long to-do list, but I'll stay focused here as I don't want to take up too much time. So number one, revel. Number two, take notes. Tom's going to be talking about some really important stuff here, and you're going to want to nail those to-dos, okay? So take notes. Now, from a time and treasure standpoint, our goals today, number one, from a time standpoint, phone bank, phone bank, phone bank, phone bank, phone bank. Did I mention phone bank? For Afton. We got 2 days to bring this thing home. This will be huge if we make this happen, gang. We're on a roll, have been ever since last November. There's a blue wave going. And a couple of Tuesdays ago, we had a lot to dance about. Well, I want even more to dance about on our Thursday campaign call, bringing home this win for Afton. So go to pdamerica.org, hit the volunteer link. Just give us an hour. That's all we're looking for, just an hour. If everybody on this call jumped on the phones for just 1 hour, we nail this, gang. Candidly. So let's make it happen. pdamerica.org, and the specific link is pdamerica.org/volunteer. Okay, let's rock this thing. Now, from a treasure standpoint, we're looking for solidarity, gang. Do whatever you can today. The goal for this call is just 100% solidarity. Time, treasure, or both. Okay, the donation link will be in the chat there. Likewise, we're going to be giving you the shot to pick up Tom's book. So let's do all that we can. Let's be active. And at the top of the hour, we'll be back to see where we're at on these goals. Back to you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Mike Fox. And with that, I would like to hand off to Donna Smith, our resident Denver Broncos fan, and somebody who's done work with Thom Hartmann for a long time. And how you doing, Donna? And what's on your mind this week?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Alan, very much. And the Broncos don't play till later today, so right. I spared you all seeing orange against the red, white, and blue. As much as I should not like football, I still like the Broncos. Sorry about that. Today I want to talk about two things. First of all, Positively Progressive is not gone forever. We took a little hiatus during some real rough times for my family. So we will be coming back with some help, I hope, from our young progressive Democrats of America to take on perhaps some of that function. Because one of the things I've been preaching to all of us about for a long time is to replace yourself, those of us who are older. those of us who are getting a little bit older, to be lifting up these young people, not only the candidates, but the people around us who are showing up for these progressive functions. Give them a voice, give them a place, and step back a little bit. They have some incredibly great ideas. And I want to really highlight those. William Walter is one of my favorite people on the planet. He really is a fighter for justice, and I love to hear William talk. And part of that is because of the energy and the enthusiasm that comes through. So please lift up those young people around you. Make it an effort today to bring somebody younger into the fold. It would be great. To talk about Thom Hartmann would be difficult to think about without thinking back to, I first met Thom, I think, in July of 2007 when I met Tim Carpenter. I met Tim shortly after I had testified to the House Judiciary Committee on medical debt and bankruptcy and what was happening to insured Americans in the United States, which is, by the way, still happening to insured Americans in the United States all these years later. And Tim introduced me to Thom at a time when I knew very, very little about doing any kind of media at all. And I was actually pretty terrified about doing anything, certainly on camera, but Thom is brilliant. And I was scared of his brilliance. I was frightened that I couldn't hold my own with that kind of mind. And what I found out very quickly is, yeah, he's brilliant, a whole lot smarter than I am, and has a historical perspective that is amazing about this country. Um, but what I also found is Thom is so humane and so decent and just a fun human being to be around. He does not rub that intelligence in like it's a weapon. He uses it to help educate us. So now, all these many years later, I think back to the times when I sat, Tom's green rooms were the most interesting places in Washington, D.C., because he brought in very diverse people. He never had just people who were on the progressive side. We often had some really interesting conversations in those green rooms. I think one person, when I met him in there, I can't remember the dude's name, but I remember he said to me, it figures you're on here. I thought, oh, well, that's okay by me. And also the sliding chair, Thom, was the most fun I ever had in my life. I had to sit in the chair and then they'd slide me across the studio up to the desk. It was the greatest thing. Anyway, Thom gave PDA such a great boost through the early period of our formation. He really did. To have that media, to have that ability to reach out to more progressive all over the country was amazing. So, Thom, thank you so much for that. The other thing that I think right now, if you don't follow Thom, you really should follow Thom either on Substack, just listen to his show, tune in when you can, pick it up later when you have time. I find two things going on with me at the same time. I'll be terrified sometimes when I read stuff he writes or listen because I know he's right and it terrifies me. But then he'll also write about how we are going to come out of this, how we're going to build back out of it, how things will become better. So I have this uplift of hope that comes after being terrified. That takes a lot of talent to do that, to take people from feeling like, oh my God, what am I going to be able to do to protect this democracy that I love? To, oh yeah, yeah, I can. We've done it before. We're going to do it again. This is a terrible threat to us. I think I know about Thom. I've not seen this kind of threat before to my democracy, not like this. I do believe we will come out of it. I believe we will. But we need to make sure that we lift voices like Thom to more people than just our own echo chamber. And Thom, thank you for being the human that you are, for understanding that just very recently the healthcare system almost took my family out again. Didn't quite because I don't let them and I won't. But thank you, Thom, for being who you are in this world and for helping PDA and for helping all of us. Back to you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Donna. And I do want to highlight, by the way, if people haven't seen it, I was at the Medicare for All conference just last week, and Donna just mentioned the healthcare system. There's a new poll out from Data for Progress, very good, excellent polling firm, and that was on Medicare for All. And I think they asked the questions very responsibly of the general American public, and it's the highest poll numbers I've ever seen for Medicare for All in a national poll, about 75% support. And I think that's roughly accurate. And and that just shows again that the progressive perspective is very much embraced by the general population, much more than is the case with the results we see from our political system, undoubtedly because of the undue influence of money and all of the ways that money and power have dominated the American political system. I want to welcome Greg Palast, by the way, who I see in the room, in the participants. And I know that we often get very many prominent people and we don't note them all for being here and welcoming them. So if I'm missing anybody out there who I would normally shout out, I apologize. But Greg is here. And Greg, of course, is a fellow Southern California who's done great investigative work and continues to do so, particularly on the real weakening of our democratic system. He's a very important ally for the information he generates as we go forward and try to protect our democracy. And Greg, so Thom Hartmann is with us, of course, and he is here on the occasion of the recent publication of his latest book, The Last President, A Broken Man, a Corrupt Party, and a World on the Brink. And I really want to recommend everybody to pick up a copy. It is, there, of course, there are innumerable books about Donald Trump, but I don't think I've read any that really situate him in the context. There's actually a lot of fascinating biographical information about Trump and very relevant biographical information to the political moment and the way that he operates now in the political moment. But I think, again, among the works that are on Trump, I don't know of any that does exactly what, Tom's work does always, which is to contextualize things in its historical framework and its relevance for the political moment and giving us information through which we can then combat, again, what is one of the most frightening, if not the most frightening, political episode of our lifetime. By the way, I did see that Marianne Williamson came into the room, because thank you, Jim Langford, for noting that, and welcome, Marianne Williamson. And by the way, we will turn the chat off while Thom is speaking. The chat will go back on when we go to Q&A. That is something we just do so to really respect our featured guests. So the chat will go off. It'll come back on when we go to Q&A, and we'll go to Q&A with Thom in a little while in the course of this hour. But right now, Thom Hartmann, welcome. We are really honored to have you here at PDA. And what was it that inspired you to write The Last American President?
Well, thank you, Alan, and to everybody who's here. And special greetings to my dear friends Marianne Williamson and Greg Palast, and you, Alan, and Donna, and so many of the people from PDA that I've hung around with for so many years. I wrote this book because I had lunch with at the Bioneers Conference with the vice president of my publishing company, or the company that published the series on hidden history. His name is Jivan, and who's an immigrant himself, and pretty freaked out. And he was like, we need a definitive book on who this guy is, where he came from, the kind of damage he's doing, and what we can do about it. And so this is the first book that Louise has helped edit, and because we wrote this book in about 2 months, and just had to do a mind-boggling amount of research, because they had 2 different lawyers read the manuscript because they're afraid of getting sued, and every sentence had to be backstopped. So there's 20 pages of footnotes at the end, or endnotes. But what I learned in writing the book was that, first of all, Trump is almost certainly a psychopath or a sociopath. And there's a big debate in psychology about whether psychopathy and sociopathy are learned or born behaviors. I don't know I don't know the answer to that question. But according to Donald's niece, Mary Trump, who is a clinical psychologist, his father, who she knew quite well, was a psychopath and was extremely brutal toward his son, Donald. And his mother was extremely distant. She was a Scottish immigrant. The Trump men seemed to like to marry immigrant women. And every summer, when Donald was home from military school, where they had sent him because he was kind of incorrigible, she would take the opportunity to go all alone to Scotland for the summer. So basically, he never saw his mother, and his father was just brutal toward him. And he ended up, Louise and I used to run a community for abused kids up in New Hampshire. I was the executive director. She was the program director. And we used to refer to these were kids who had just been through hell. The second kid I did intake on, his name was Tony. The neighbors had noticed a smell in his house and called the police. His parents had tied his brother to a pole in the basement where he died and was rotting. Um, we're talking really severe abuse to end up in programs like ours. And so we would talk about our kids having empty buckets. Like, you could just like no matter how much love you poured in there, no matter how much you were there for them, no matter what you did for them, it was never enough. They would almost always, at least initially, at least in the first year, respond with anger or withdrawal or attempts to provoke rage or whatever. I mean, this was just real common behavior. And we just all acknowledge, they got a hole in the bottom of their bucket, and our job is to try to fill that hole, and close that hole so we can fill their bucket. And Trump's bucket has a huge hole in the bottom of it. There's no amount of love that he can ever get that will satisfy him. And most of the behavior in his life is directed toward trying to get love, trying to get that parental love, that parental approval. And and I think a lot of that translates into his bullying behavior and things like that. So there's that. I mean, the first third of the book is kind of Trump's psychopathology, how he emerged from childhood a severely wounded young man, and then hooked up with Roy Cohn as his mentor. And Roy Cohn was a genuine, identifiable psychopath who taught Donald Trump basically how to convert psychopathic behavior into business success and political success. And we examine, what the lessons that Roy Cohn taught him, like, never apologize and always, if you're hit back 100 times harder, and always try to destroy your enemies. Don't just win, etc. And then the middle third of the book is the damage that the Republican Party has done, this machine that enabled Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a singular phenomenon. The GOP was ready for Donald Trump. The foundation had been laid. It started in a big way. Well, really, the Republican Great Depression caused most people in business and the failed attempt to kidnap and assassinate FDR by the DuPont brothers and others, other oligarchs. And the success of FDR during the Republican Great Depression and the New Deal, and his success in trashing what he called the economic royalists, and the media of America following that, caused it to be caused most wealthy people and most businesses to just check out of politics in the 1930s. They just said, screw it, we're just going to go back to making money. This whole, let's buy a politician like we had during the Coolidge era and the Harding era and, the early Hoover era, it hasn't worked out for us, and it's screwed the country and it's screwing us. And so we're just going to get out of politics. And that slightly changed in 54 when Brown v. Board happened. And as a result, Fred Koch started funding the John Birch Society in a big way, and they started putting up billboards all over the country that said impeach Earl Warren. But it's kind of sped up in the 60s and 64, 65 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, of the Civil Rights Act, and legislation that strengthened the power of the National Labor Relations Board. But it really got kicked off with the Powell Memo in 1971, where Lewis Powell wrote the early version of Project 2025 and said, here's how we take over America. We take over the educational system. We take over the school. We being oligarchs, business oligarchs, big business. It was written to the president of his next door neighbor and best friend, Eugene Sindor, who was the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at the time. We take over the universities. We take over the business schools. We take over the colleges more generally. We take over the churches. We consolidate the media and control it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Powell then was put on the Supreme Court by Nixon in 72. And in 78 was the author of a Supreme Court decision called Bellotti, in which it was First National Bank of Boston versus Frank Bellotti. Bellotti was the Attorney General for Massachusetts, and they had this law that said that corporations couldn't put money into political campaigns unless they directly involved the corporation. And the First National Bank of Boston was funding an anti-abortion ballot initiative. And so they got sued, and they sued back, and you had a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court. And Lewis Powell wrote the decision saying corporations are definitely people. This was the giant punctuation mark at the end of the 1886 case that I wrote about in my book on equal protection, and that I'm writing a brand new book about right now. And so the Bellotti case, led us to Citizens United, and Citizens United led us to now. But that Bellotti case paved the way for Ronald Reagan to float into office on a sea of oil money after committing treason by reaching out to the Iranian mullahs and telling them that if they would just hold the U.S. hostages until the inauguration, that they could get their spare parts from the Reagan administration, something that came to be known as the Iran-Contra scandal. Mm-hmm. And this was really the point at which the Republican Party went all in on neoliberalism, went all in on corruption, went all in on committing treason to win elections, and really started pushing, drop the top tax rate from 74% down to 25%, drop the top corporate tax rate from 60% down to 40%. Deregulate, made it legal for corporations to buy back their own stocks, so basically legalized stock manipulation. Put Ann Gorsuch, Neil Gorsuch's mother, in charge of the EPA with a specific mandate to destroy the EPA, which she had to resign in embarrassment, really in disgrace. She was going to be prosecuted for her crimes in office. So that was, and then throughout the 80s and 90s, of course, Republican-aligned oligarchs built this massive media empire. Ronald Reagan fast-tracked Rupert Murdoch's citizenship into the U.S. So Fox News got started, in addition to all the Fox TV stations. You had the Rush Limbaugh show started in 1996, the same year that, or maybe it was 97, the year after, that Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act, which ended all the controls on how many radio stations, TV stations, and newspapers a single corporation or oligarch could own. And so Lewis Powell's vision of the right wing controlling more than 75% of the media in America has now been realized. We're there. So the middle part of the book is how the Republican Party and these right-wing oligarchs, largely just to keep their own taxes low, but also some were just hardcore ideologues, libertarian ideologues like the Kochs, really paved the foundation, created the foundation for a neo-fascist administration. And because we had been so inured to being lied to, by Reagan, and our media had become so weak in terms of pushing back, and we had and NBC had spent literally millions of dollars teaching Donald Trump how to be a media star, creating a whole mythology around this guy. He was in the middle of a bankruptcy when he started the Apprentice show. He still had more bankruptcies to go, yet they portrayed him. I mean, he was probably one of the most indebted men in America, and they portrayed him as this billionaire, wise elder. And that ran for 11 years. And that, I think that's the main thing that's responsible for his being president, other than that first time around he ran against Hillary Clinton, and, who had her own baggage. And he did so with a lot of help from Russia. So anyhow, the middle part of the book is about that, how the GOP basically established a world, a country, a political system where Donald Trump would be welcome and could succeed. And then the last third of the book is, what do we do about it? How do we create movement politics? How do we legally fight back? What do we do about corporate personhood and this doctrine that money is speech? How do we put back the middle class together?
Mhm.
How are we going to recover from all the damage that's being done by Trump? So, in essence, that's the book, Alan, and I hope I answered your question.
Oh, it's fantastic, and I really found, the sections. I mean, right off the bat, it's absolutely fascinating. I watched the movie The Apprentice. I thought your work on Cohn actually accented and highlighted that in more responsible ways than the movie it did, though. Because Cohn was too charming, and he comes across that way in that movie too much. But even there in
Yeah.
the movie, the betrayals Trump has of the people close to him are really profound. So I recommend the movie, but supplement it with this, folks. I'd be remiss we start the question Q&A, and I'm going to have Donna Smith. I know that Hartzell Gray was supposed to join us, the candidate to join. We also have William Walter here from Young Progressive Democrats of America Steering Committee.
Hartzell's
So
there, Alan.
Donna, William, Hartzell, but then everybody else. Oh, okay. Then we're going to go Donna, William, Hartzell, and then to the general stack for questions. And I don't think that the one thing I really want to accent, let's stay on the book. And so I'll toss to Donna for her first question in a second. But there's something I want to accent about particular framings that Thom has in his work that I think really everybody on this call should be aware of because they speak to this moment so profoundly, so deeply. And I think oftentimes they speak to ways in which the general American population can attract to the message we have, the economic message we have, the message for building a truly democratic society, oftentimes better than a lot of the rest of the left does. So we'll get to that later. I do want to say this too, folks. I'd be remiss if I didn't also encourage everybody not only to buy the book, but to tune into Thom as often as you can, to let your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers know about the Thom Hartmann show. It is an incredible media asset, and again, it's really it operates in the voice of the common people. I think it's a very very powerful instrument as we build back up, a more honest democratic society, overcome the fascists, and set out to maybe build the America that we can build here. So Donna, though, first question for Thom.
Thank you, Alan, and Thom. Thank you for that rundown of the book. I have not read it yet, so I look forward to it. I'm very interested in the media consolidation right now, and very concerned about it here in Colorado, as I'm sure in many other places. We are having whole groups of stations and so forth bought up by large corporations and consolidating. And that's our popular media. But how do those of us who have become accustomed to getting our local news and some more information from popular media, when we find this consolidation and an obvious trend towards more corporatization, how do we create more media, Thom? What do we do to make sure that the media somehow stays free?
Well, there are people and groups who are setting up websites that are designed to be like local newspapers, and there's a number of progressive versions of those out. There's also in a lot of cities just a weekly kind of, they used to refer to them as entertainment papers. They'd have all the stuff about what
Yep.
bands are playing and stuff like that.
Yep.
But they tend to be
Westward here in Denver, it's called Westward.
Yeah, exactly. They tend to be fairly progressive in their politics. So that's a starting point. If you want to create, your own website for the community, I would encourage anybody to go for that. Try to find strategic partners. This is something that the right is doing right now. There's over 200 local newspapers that have websites with names like the Miami Times. I mean, I don't know that that's one of them particularly. I'm just pulling that out of the air, but or the Denver Herald. But they sound like a real newspaper and they look like a real newspaper. And most of their news content is AI generated. It's just all robotic. But their editorial content is all coming from right-wing sources. They're reprinting articles out of, the Heritage magazine or from the Cato Institute's publication, Reason, stuff like that. There's more than 200 of these, and some of them are getting a lot of traction. So, I would encourage you to find local alternatives to that and do everything you can to support them and spread the word about them. Also,
Thanks.
if you live in a community that has a community radio station, there are about 800 of these around the country. I'm on, I think, probably around 100 of them. But a lot of them carry programs like mine. My show is absolutely free to any community station. We provide support. I record fundraisers. I'll come to town and do fundraisers for you. And it never costs a penny to our nonprofit stations. We have a for-profit side. We're on Sirius XM, and we make plenty of money off the advertising from that to be able to fund everything we're doing. The show is available through the Pacifica audio port. We're also on Free Speech TV, which is on it's on Direct and Dish, on Sling. It's on Roku. It's on a bunch of platforms. If you've got one of those free TV platforms, you can find it, Free Speech TV. And if you can't find it, demand that they adopt it. And that's something that you can share locally. Although that's not a local resource, that's a national show. But in terms of progressive content that you can access locally.
If I can still also, I mean, I know it's very hard to judge the numbers now. And I was actually just saw Amy Goodman in New York. There's a documentary film coming out about her, and close to her consigliere over the years, Dennis Moynihan. And where Thom Hartmann and Amy Goodman rank in American media shows and on radio. But I think the estimate is both shows have actually consistently been in the top 10 for quite a while now. So it is a large community of listeners listening to Thom Hartmann. And I actually really think that's a great combination of shows because Thom has a lot of open forum listener calls, and the conversation really tends to hone in on American politics, really framed in the context of American constitutional history. Amy's more of a news gathering thing for headlines of the top 15 minutes, and then reports from out and around the world and the country with people who are engaged with the news of the day. And they're a great combination of shows, and they certainly can anchor and should anchor, I think, going forward, building up progressive media that people should be listening to. The next person, by the way, I'm going to call on is William Walter, who plies the same craft that you do on your podcast, Donna, and Thom does in his radio show. He's already a radio veteran, and he's still a very young man. And I know that he has a lot of young influencer ideas he has for who should be included in the maybe package of media assets we should be sending out from PDA. But William, a quick question for Thom Hartmann.
Hey, William.
Yeah, hi, Thom. Fun fact, you mentioned, local progressive radio. I actually hosted my own show on civic media in Wisconsin. And when my show wrapped up, your show moved into that time slot. So I was honored to be able to kind of, in a way, open for you. But my question is going to be around young people in particular. You mentioned the consolidation of media. And something that I've found with a lot of young people is they lack the historical context of why and when so much of the, let's call it what it is, shitty situations we find ourselves in today, why they came to fruition. And so many of them are getting their information purely from social media sites, TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube, Twitch streamers, that kind of stuff. And these environments often make false information and conservative information, being uplifted and supported by the billionaire oligarchs, the easiest access. How do we remind young people that there is a discernible difference between truth and fiction? And how do we get them to recognize that many of these problems that we have faced in the past could be solved with solutions used in the past if our elected officials are comfortable enough taking that step?
Sure. Let's go backwards. Back in the 1920s, I mean, radio was really became a thing in the 1900s and 1910s. And by the 1920s, you had radio stations that were blowing out giant signals and interfering with each other because they were so close on the dial, and the frequencies of the dial were not yet clearly defined. And so the FCC was created to basically standardize all this, but mostly to prevent interchannel interference. So, if you're a big station in Detroit and there's a big station in Chicago, they're close enough to each other that they would interfere. They've got to be on, more than 100 kilohertz apart, or, whatever. But when they put the FCC together, they also asked the question. I mean, this was actually, this was an addenda to the FCC rules. This was in the 30s during the Roosevelt era. Asked the question, does this new media, which competed with newspapers back then, does this new media, could it be manipulated in ways that will be damaging to democracy, the way that we saw with, for example, the Hearst, fortune and the yellow journalism newspapers? And should we do something about that? And so they did. They created this thing called the Telecommunications Act, which said that you couldn't own a newspaper and a radio station in the same town. You couldn't own multiple radio stations in the same state. You couldn't own multiple newspapers across multiple states. I mean, it's basically limiting ownership. And it was updated again in the 50s to include television. And that's the legislation. And basically what it did is it guaranteed competition. It didn't regulate content. There was a piece of it called well, actually, this is an FCC rule called the Fairness Doctrine, which said that you had to operate in the public interest. And every year, the FCC radio station that I worked at, I worked in radio for about a decade when I was a kid, in my 20s, every station that I was on every year, the FCC, maybe it's every 2 years, the FCC comes by and they look at what's called your public file, which is every complaint that's ever been filed against you. And if they determine that you're not operating in the public interest, you're out, you lose your license. And the main way that back then stations operated in the public interest was by running public service announcements, local bake sale for the school and stuff like that. But a lot of people think that the Fairness Doctrine required, if a station carried Rush Limbaugh, they also had to carry me. It didn't. It did have one provision that was sort of like that, which was that if a radio or television station were to run an editorial by the owner of the station or the manager of the station, which most of them did because they were competing with newspapers. It was like the equivalent of the editorial board of the newspaper. Then they had to give an identical number of minutes to an opposing voice. And in fact, when I worked at WJIM TV when I was 17, that was part of my job, was to find the alternative voice to the once a week editorial that the station owner would put on the air. That all went away in 1987 with Ronald Reagan. He just simply stopped enforcing that. Also, the equal time rule, which said that if you put one politician on during a political campaign time, you have to put his opponent on for the same amount of time. All that went away with Reagan. The ownership rules went away with Clinton in 96 as a result of massive lobbying. So that's the backstory. And you want people to understand the backstory because, if we simply reverse those two insane decisions, we would be back to having competition in media. And competition's a good thing because then you have competition of ideas as well as money. Beyond that, speaking to young people, I know that one of the things that I've learned from being in the media all these years is that people like to take media from people who are basically like them. The biggest like them is probably age, secondarily race, maybe tertiarily gender or religion. I'm not sure. I've never seen an actual ranking, but most people in their 60s and 70s in the media have followers who are in their 60s and 70s. Most people in their 20s and 30s in the media have followers who are in their 20s and 30s. The conservative side, there's 1,500 right-wing radio stations in the country, and most of them have a local show. So you've got this huge farm team that's being built up, literally thousands of young people in their 20s being brought in, and they're learning radio the same way I learned radio. I started out as a DJ in a dorm at MSU, and then went to this was when I was 16, and then got a job at a local station, and then for the next 3 years I bounced around as a DJ, and then I did news for 7 years, and that's how you learn the business, which is a really important thing to do if you want to be successful in radio. And we just don't have that farm team because we surrendered all that stuff to them in the 80s and 90s. And the Democratic Party never had the foresight to do it right. So I would just encourage any young people that you know of who have the skills and the talent to do media, whether it's TikTok, whether it's short form stuff, whether it's on your phone, whether it's formal, whether it's official, whether to do it and support them in any way you can and spread the word about them.
Thank you for that. Thank you, William. And some quick housekeeping. First of all, we will now take a stack for people who will ask questions. Susie Shannon, I saw your hand up, and Susie, I'm going to call on first, but we are going to have someone else first. But before we open up the chat, I would like either Hanye or Mike Fox to put in the link so that we can have split donations with our endorsed candidate, Hartzell Gray, who himself, besides being the now on a break from being the national coordinator of Young Progressive Democrats of America, was himself a host of a drive time radio show in Kansas City, Missouri for many years. So just like William, our YPDA steering committee seems to be loaded up with people who aspire to follow in your footsteps. Thom Hartmann, here is Hartzell Gray, candidate for Congress, Missouri's 4th District.
Yeah, I can't
Hey,
believe
Hudson.
that a call with these many radio folks that anybody can get a word in. But look at this. This is incredible. I'm so proud of us, my friends. It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be on this call with you, Thom. I'm a student of yours. I don't know if you are officially a professor, but I feel like you've got a lot of students that you have trained up. So I appreciate you. And my question, it's both not quite related to our media discussion, but also I think very related, especially in your expertise. So I come from a working class district here in Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri. Our folks are facing sky high rents, medical debt, rural hospitals are going away, and on top of that, we're getting gerrymandered out of our representation. And so my question for you, and I think I think you do touch on it in your latest book that I can't wait to read. If you had one message to send to independent grassroots candidates like myself, who want to bring the fight for universal health care, housing as a human right, a job with a living wage, and corporate accountability, what would you say to someone like myself? What would that message be? What is the message that we can help build a movement with that will not just pressure Washington, but also can represent the people like us to also activate and organize our folks here on the ground?
Yeah, it's a great question, Hartzell. Um, I think most of us know the issues, and certainly the big issues are medical debt, student debt, the right to vote, um, corporate and media consolidation, stuff like that. Um, the movement, as it were, is going to have to figure out, how to prioritize those things as we go into the next election. Are you a Democrat, by the way?
Yes, he is.
I'm a proud student of the Black radical tradition. Depending on the day, I'll say that I'm a Democrat louder than other times.
He's
Well,
running. He's running as a Democrat.
Yeah, running as a
That's great.
Democrat in our primary. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I kid, but yes, I'm running as a
yeah,
Democrat.
I think that's the single most important thing, and I don't mean that as an apologist for the Democratic Party, because I'm one of its
Mhm.
most frequent critics, particularly the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party. But here's this billion-dollar corporation, literally a billion-dollar corporation, that has an open door with a sign hanging on it that says, "Come on in and take us over." And I realize it's harder in some places than others. The old boy network can be kind of resistant to change. But several of my books have stories in them about people who basically, in most cases, they call up my radio station complaining about their crappy Democratic representation. And I'd say, well, why don't you join the party? Becoming a precinct committee person. Well, I'll give you an example. In 2008, when Obama was elected, the Republican Party went into shock. And the initial response to this in 2009 was the Tea Party, was funding the Tea Party to take him out. And this was from the billionaire right wing. But the other thing that they funded was something called the Concord Project. And the Concord Project's YouTube videos are still up. You can still find them. Or you can Google my name and Concord Project, and they'll pop right up, the articles that I've written about them, along with the YouTube's embedded. And it's this guy, just an average looking guy, looking right at the camera. And he says, "You want to know what the most powerful political position in America is today? It's not the presidency. It's not being on the Supreme Court. It's not in Congress, the House, or the Senate. It's precinct committee person." And the reason why is because the precinct committee people are, number one, they're the first people that your elected officials talk to when they come back into the state, which they do periodically. And so they're going to hear your opinion more than anybody else's. Number two, the precinct committee people are the ones who write and vote on the party position platform. And all those local position platforms make up the state platform, and the state platforms make up the national platform. So you have a say in the national platform. Number three, the precinct committee people are the ones who decide who the local party is going to basically endorse and thus functionally allow to run in the primaries. And so the point he makes in it is if in our Republican primaries, we can make sure that all of our candidates are Tea Party candidates, then it doesn't matter who wins, we're going to have a Tea Party in Congress. Well, the same thing applies on our side. And so I think one of the most important things that we can do if we want to produce real change, and I realize how insanely difficult this is and how hard the party can bite back. Marianne Williamson has stories to tell about that are just gruesome. And so does Bernie Sanders. I mean, a number of people have been through it. But if enough of us at the grassroots level take over our local parties, I did a fundraiser for the Progressive Caucus when it was brand new, and Bernie started this thing, and it was in 2004 or 2005, and I went down to Arizona to do it with Raul Grijalva was running it at the time. He was such a sweet guy, and we had maybe 25 people show up, and they had, I think, 12 members at the time. I mean, and we raised a few $100, but now it's about half the party. It's really come a long way. And so, the Democratic Party, I get it. In 92, Clinton really, he went to the neoliberal side, even though he campaigned as a progressive, because Citizens United, well, at that time it wasn't Citizens United, it was the Bellotti decision. But basically, the Supreme Court had enabled, so much money in the political system that he felt he had no choice. And it wasn't until Obama came along and proved that you can actually run a national campaign based on using the web to generate individual donations that the Democratic Party had an opportunity to step away from neoliberalism. And Joe Biden was the first president to really do that. I mean, Obama just kind of followed in Clinton's footsteps. So, it's a tragedy that Biden was such an incompetent communicator that most Americans have no idea all the incredible good stuff he did and very progressive stuff he did. That I don't think even Biden would have been able to do that if the party hadn't been in many parts of this country taken over by local progressives. So that's my last, but I think most important piece of advice is get inside your local party and take that sucker over.
Well, and I think that's so just for folks, during my campaign, I've been going to a lot of Democratic clubs throughout the county, throughout the state. And you want to talk about, doing the most amount of good, most amount of folks, the most efficient amount of time. It's those Democratic clubs all throughout those counties who not only can tell you what's going on, but also they can pinpoint where we can go out and, 10 toes down in the trenches. So I just want to say thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you. And yeah, from one radio guy to another, longtime listener, first time caller, I appreciate you.
And thanks a lot, Hartzell. Keep it up.
Well, and Hartzell, we're going to bring you back probably in about 20 minutes, okay? And if you can hang out, and we'll get an update on Hartzell's campaign. And two things there will be, of course, everybody can donate in a split donation to Hartzell's campaign and PDA. So it's a good time right now to work for Afton Bain in the next 2 days, and then support Hartzell great financially, because with 2 days left in the campaign, our money's not going to do a lot for Afton. That's all on the, is the go code signal has been sent for Afton. It's time to make phone calls and knock on doors down there in Tennessee 7th. Okay, so we're going to go to the stack. And I called on Susie Shannon to be first. Susie, we can unmute Susie. And while we're finding Susie, why don't we start with Don McCann, your question, then Susie will be next, then Carly. Don McCann, please unmute.
Okay. I'm a former president of PNHP, single payer supporters. My question is, in a recent article, Ralph Nader reminded us that in 2000, Donald Trump was a strong advocate for single payer reform. With the current turmoil in the Republican Party over healthcare reform, is there any prospect that Trump might return to advocating for Medicare for all if his ego can be appeased by giving him credit for finally fixing our highly dysfunctional healthcare system?
Yeah, I think it is possible. I think that some of his betrayals of his colleagues and his billionaire supporters' ideologies give some hope to that. The thing to keep in mind is this is a guy who really does not have any ideology politically. He doesn't have any governing philosophy. He doesn't have any, specific ideas about how things should be done or anything like that. I just got a note that time's up.
Oh, no, sorry, that one of the staff members puts a 1 minute limit on the questions. Sorry,
Oh, I
that's
see. Okay.
a,
It's all good. And so I don't think that when he supported single payer, he even understood what it was. He just knew it was popular in New York among the Democrats. And so, if you're hoping to get there with Donald Trump, it's certainly not going to happen in the next 12 months because it would never get through this legislature. If we can take the House and Senate, I'd give it a 5 or 10% chance, actually. Maybe even greater than that, because like you said, he's so ego driven.
Susie Shannon, if you're unmuted, are you Susie?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead. Susie Shannon, by the way, the chair of the DNC Poverty Council. Take it away, Susie.
Hi, Tom. Yes, and I also work for an organization called Housing is a Human Right. First of all, I want to thank you for everything you've written on homelessness and housing now being considered as a commodity. And I've noticed that there is almost an unprecedented attack on our unhoused community, as well as tenants. And even with Mom Donnie's run, a lot of when a lot of the op-eds that we saw that ran in newspapers, were really attacking renters and attacking rent control. And I just want to know, like, what are your thoughts about kind of where we are? I know that you've written about housing as commodity, but also on homelessness and the fact that you were even arrested for vagrancy a long, long time ago. So I'm just wondering, like, where do you think we are and how can we get progressive organizations to focus more on some of these issues?
Yeah, that was in Sparks, Nevada in 1968.
Yeah.
Yeah. The commodification of housing is crazy, and this is part of this larger discussion of what are the commons, what are the appropriate boundaries of the commons? What is the point where it stops being a normal government function and starts becoming a communist function? What should be for example, I don't want the government making my computer or my blue jeans. But I do think the government should play a major role in housing, and I do want the government providing my health care, and I do want the government providing or at least paying for my education, and my kids. And I think those are entirely appropriate things. So, I think a large part of this is having that discussion about the commons and to what extent this is part of the commons. And I think that's the main way to approach the entire issue. Does that make sense?
Susie might be automatically muted again. I do a lot of work here with Susie, and I think I know Susie well enough to say that I think she'll get the point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so to the extent that we can, I mean, there's a bunch of micro solutions, but that's the macro one. But there's more empty houses in America that are investment houses where people just bought them and they're sitting on them that are empty than there are homeless people in America. And, an awful lot of those are foreign owned. Many countries limit foreign ownership of single family homes. The United States could do it as well. In fact, that's the sort of thing that would probably make Trump even more popular. Many countries, or some countries anyway, mostly European countries, limit single family home ownership by corporations. I think we should be doing that. We've got a problem with this renting software that maximizes rental prices, operating as a monopoly. Lena Khan was going to do something about that. Trump probably won't, but again, that's an issue we should talk about. So, I mean, it's not like there aren't solutions to this. Not to mention, the federal government subsidizing, low-income housing. That's how the Trump family made their fortune. In fact, was
Permission to cut in?
Oh,
No.
Sorry, Carly. Please don't do that. You were unmuted because you're on next on deck. But go ahead, finish your thought, Tom, and then Carly will have a question.
That was pretty much my thought.
Okay, Carly, go ahead. Please unmute again, Carly.
Sorry about that, but I was told to unmute. That was the cue on the on my thing.
Yeah,
But
and just so
the question
everybody's going
I
to get
have
unmuted a
is,
few seconds before you ask your question. So next up will be Dorothy Reich. Go
but
ahead,
the
Cody.
question I have is, how is it that Trump's able to still have this hold over people, even though nothing he has done has been for the greater good? Even some of my family's friends have fallen to his propaganda, and what goes through my head is that, can they not see the writing on the wall? I mean, I'm neurodivergent too, but there is no excuse.
Yeah. He has a multi-billion dollar media machine that the Democratic Party has no analogy to, no analog to, that supports him. And it is possible. One of my neighbors lives in that media bubble, and he's a very nice guy. I've known him for quite some time. He and his wife and their friends. But he watches Fox News all day long, and when he's in the car, he listens to right-wing radio, the local right-wing guy. And it's amazing what he doesn't know. I think partly Trump is able to hold people because they're living in an information bubble that overlooks the things that you and I know about Trump and promotes twisted versions of other things. But I think also there's a couple of other factors. No white candidate for president of the United States has won the majority of the white male vote since the 1960s, since the Voting Rights Act. When the Democratic Party turned its back on segregationists in the 60s, and Nixon stepped in with his Southern strategy and said Republicans are going to, make a nice friendly home for the Klan. When I started my radio program, I assumed that maybe 10 or 20% of white people were racists. That was about the percentage that I had noticed as a kid growing up, the kids who would just casually use the N-word and stuff like that. The conclusion I've come to now, having done this business, having done my show now for 22 years, is that it's probably closer to half of white people are just openly racist. So you've got, people who they hate the same people Trump hates, and that binds them together. And then the third factor, I think, is the one that John Dean pointed out in his book, Conservatives Without Conscience, which was based on Robert Altman's book, The Authoritarians, which is that psychology tells us that about 20% of the population are authoritarians. About 1/1000th of a percent are authoritarian leaders. The vast majority of them are authoritarian followers. Authoritarian followers are people who just want Big Daddy to tell them what to do and keep them safe. They grew up feeling fundamentally unsafe. It may be an inherited psychological trait. It may be, some aspect of personality, or it may be something that was learned, as a result of childhood experiences or whatever. But about 20% of the population just want Big Daddy. And in this regard, George Lakoff has written about this at some length, that the Republican Party is the strict father party. Dad's going to tell you what to do. The Democratic Party is the nurturing family party, or the nurturing mother family, mom, or the family collectively. We're going to all work this out. We're all here for each other. And so there's a psychological, perhaps psychophysiological aspect to this also, that you're always going to run up against. I mean, any authoritarian party, and you see this across, Peter Turchin has written about this at some length. You see this across democracies around the world, that there basically is not a country anywhere that doesn't have an authoritarian party that has about 20% support. And so, you combine those things and along with the religious aspect and the religious authoritarianism, that's reflected in the modern day evangelical movement. And what you have is the Trump coalition. And the good news is the independents in that coalition are starting to peel away.
Let me ask you, though, I know, I'm sorry, Dorothy's going to be next. Now, given that he was a male, but all the presidents were male at the time, a strong Democrat, a willful, strong Democrat like FDR, though, could negate that. The fact that they're a male, they could even be like Thatcher, a strong woman, though that was, of course, a conservative, so it would fit in with the authoritarian right wing. But if you have a strong Democrat, does that negate potentially? Do you think that might? I know you do. You do just so much thinking on this stuff and research on it.
Yeah, no. FDR had the authoritarian vote. FDR in many ways was an authoritarian.
Right.
I mean, he was like, I inherited a mess in this country, and damn it, I'm going to fix it. And I know what I'm doing. And, and he came right out and said, we're going to make a lot of mistakes and we will fix them quickly. And he did. A lot of those agencies that started died within 6 months. But he pushed things through, and if you go back and read the history of that era, probably the best one is the book about Frances Perkins, the woman who wrote the New Deal. She was the first female labor secretary in history, and she was the one behind the New Deal, really. She was the one who convinced FDR. And in that book, you learn how the Supreme Court for the first 4 years was knocking down his stuff, calling it unconstitutional. The press, including press like the New York Times, were calling him a fascist, calling him a wannabe dictator. So yeah, I think if you had a strong Democratic president, I think the same things were said about Lyndon Johnson, by the way, who accomplished amazing things. I mean, he lied us into Vietnam, which has forever tarnished his reputation. But he accomplished a lot of real good, but he was also a tyrant. So, I'm not saying that the Democratic Party is never going to embrace authoritarians or authoritarianism, and it won't ever have a leader who could appeal to authoritarian followers. It certainly has in the past, and probably will again.
And I think Bernie is in no way an authoritarian, but nobody on the political landscape gives succinct, clear answers to questions, as if, like, I saw a recent New York Times dialogue he had, and the guy asked about Medicare for all, looking to sort of like get some wiggle room against it, and Bernie just shot that down in 2 words, and on to the next thing. It was clear he wasn't going to waver. And I think that is part of his appeal, and broadens his appeal. Again, the book is The Last American President. Can we keep you for about 5 more minutes? Dorothy Reich, I've already promised a question to. And again, we'll get I'll ask a final question I do want to ask about, because it's going to speak to what I'm going to be speaking about on December 11th at that PDA event in Los Angeles. So Dorothy, you're up.
Hi, Thom. How are you? Good to see you again. I listen to you every morning on my way to work. So a couple of things. First of all, did you see the website on the White House website now? They're attacking media, and interestingly, one of the people they're hitting on is the Washington Post.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Second,
yeah, that's an indication of how long his loyalties last.
Yeah.
Next thing I wanted to say is, oh no, forgetting. If you want to get into the Democratic Party, you can do it, but it isn't as easy as you make it sound, because these people are not like us, and you have to find common ground with them, and it's extremely difficult. It took me years to get inside the Democratic Party.
Where you live.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, yeah, but still, people have their vested interest there. You start talking to them about rent control, they might not be so interested in you. You have to be really careful till you get in and start getting your policies done. And the third thing is, what do you think about Anand Giroir? Well, I can't pronounce his name. Wrote a whole thing about the Epstein people. Really, they have one thing in common, and that's cruelty. That they have no empathy. They have no idea of what their policies are doing to people. People like Larry Summers make decisions, and they don't care what happens further down the road when they make those decisions. For example, in the housing crisis. So, what do you think about that?
I haven't read Anand's piece, but I'm familiar with the argument, and I think it's true. I think what we're looking at, I think the Trump administration is stocked with them. I think the Bush administration had a fair number of just genuine sociopaths, people who are incapable of experiencing empathy. They think that they're the only human being in the world, and all the rest of us are just chess pieces to move around to satisfy what they want and what they need. I mean, 13 of his cabinet members are billionaires. You don't get to be a billionaire by being a nice guy, generally speaking. And it's one of the realities. One of the things we find is that the percentage of sociopaths in senior business positions is about twice the percentage, in some cases 3 times the percentage of that in the general population. So, what you're looking at are high functioning sociopaths. And sociopaths are typically very charming when they're high functioning, when they're smart, very charming, and, very capable of blending in. There's been some great books on this. John Gray wrote one, The People of the Lie. There's another one called The Snakes in Suits. I forget the author. But it's not a new phenomenon.
Yeah, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel.
Thank you.
Elon Musk and Peter Thiel.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy.
Yeah, I can't diagnose somebody individually.
Thank you, Dorothy. As we wrap up, I actually want to highlight one other aspect of your work that I think is so important for progressives going forward, but then bring it to a central theme that you spoke at the LA event where I last saw you a few weeks ago. It was in the Q&A. First of all, I think you're a very unique person, almost in the global left, in that you not only have been a lifelong progressive, very articulate person laying out the realities facing progressives to create a just economy and a just society. And I want to ask a question about, the Keynesian tradition, FDR, where we are now in terms of bringing that back. But also, you're so unique because you also are somebody who started small businesses, studied the structure of small business. And, when you look at the base of right-wing movements across the world, they tend to be anchored often by small business groups. So I just wanted to highlight that for people because I've always heard everything you've ever said about small businesses to be so much in harmony with our shared politics. I think that's something that can be very important as a message to the American people going forward. The question, though, I wanted to ask was on December 11th when I speak at this event, and the DNC will be in town. I'll invite Ken Martin to attend. He probably won't be able to attend, but I'll probably try to record something with Ken Martin. Of course, we're progressives. We're critical of the party not being the blocks that progressives feel. We'll talk about that. But I'm not Ken Martin's enemy. I want to work with him. He's the head of the DNC. Let's try to make the party more progressive. But I'm also going to say very forthright, and this is in many respects something that I thought you made in your talk in LA in your Q&A questions, that we can look out at global history and American history, and there is only one set of macro, broadly understood policies and policy framings that produce a prosperous, broadly middle-class society in an industrial technological society. And those were the strategies adopted by FDR. And you can look at them in their adjustments in Western Europe, East Asia, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, but nothing else has worked. Nothing. When you say you were going more free market, the middle class starts getting pulled apart. And those societies, until you got to FDR, did not produce the. Remember, I don't know if you've spoken often about this in your talks, but you are so eloquent with your statistics in Los Angeles about the growth of the middle class up to 63% and then its dissipation down. And I'm going to make this, and I'm committed to making it, but I just wanted to applaud you for, in many respects, in my thinking, when I heard you talk in Los Angeles, that the only way to achieve the America that Americans want is a return to these strategies that were adopted by FDR, maintained for about 40 or 50 years, and the middle class has been chipped away ever since. So just your reflections on that as a political framing.
Yeah, it's been a major part of my speeches for years. It's a major part of a lot of my books, particularly The Hidden History of American Democracy, The Hidden History of the American Middle Class, Screwed back in 2001. And that is that those policies that FDR enacted that expanded the commons, basically, that redefined the commons. There was a time when the commons was all the land you could steal from the Indians. There was a time when the commons, the whole story of the commons goes back to the common area in the little town where all the sheep could graze, and what's his name's tragedy, the commons, Garrett, what's his name's terrible kind of libertarian trashing of the idea of the commons. But the commons is a real thing. The stuff that we all had owned together, that we administer together for our common good. It's where the phrase commonwealth came from. It's why so many of the early colonies, it's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There was a commonwealth that everybody shared. So what does that encompass? And I think in the modern era, it shouldn't just be the military, protecting us all militarily, the police protecting us legally, the fire department protecting us from the fire, the public road system. These are parts of the commons everybody agrees with. The public library system, you get a little more disagreement. Public schools, you're starting to get disagreement as a result of the Bill Gates, thing back 15, 20 years ago when they started really pitching charter schools. But broadly speaking, that list I just gave you are generally accepted by most people as being the commons. If you look at Canada or any of the European countries or Taiwan or Japan or South Korea, Australia, you see that they've added to that list public health care college education, and the right to join a union, and which is basically economic and workplace rights. And the right to join the union in particular is what creates a middle class consistently, and as unions disintegrate, the middle class disintegrates. And those other things provide the floor that the middle class stands on, so people don't fall so deep that they can't recover. And so those, I went through that history in that talk in Los Angeles, and why in the 1960s. It's a fascinating story. In 1951, Russell Kirk wrote this book called The Conservative Mind, and he's considered the godfather of the modern day conservative movement. Alan, can I have like 3 minutes to tell this story?
Oh, you got it. Oh, yeah, as long as you like, yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, he wrote this book called The Conservative Mind, and in this book and in the writings around it, mostly by William F. Buckley, who was a close friend of his, they came up with this idea. Now, keep in mind, this is 1951. In 1951, we weren't even 50% of us in the middle class. We were still in the high 40s. The middle class had grown tremendously. It was about 20% of us at the end of World War II. But by 1951, it was in the 40s. And their theory was that the middle class was something that had a more than 50% middle class had never been tried in the history of the world. And that when you have unregulated capitalism even in a pseudo or a semi-democratic society, typically what you have is a small ruling 1% who control 90% of the wealth, a small middle class, which is around 5 to 10%, sometimes 15% of the population, which are the doctors, lawyers, the professional class who serve the wealthy class. And then you've got the bottom 85 or 90% who are the working poor. And that's the norm. Adam Smith wrote about this in Wealth of Nations. Actually, he wrote about it at some length in his book, A Theory of Moral Sentiments, that was published in 1781, I think it was. It was published, or no, it was before Wealth of Nations. It must have been 71. So anyhow, that was just conventional wisdom, that's the way it was. So FDR and Francis Perkins said, no, we're going to build a middle class that's more than half of America. So we were headed in that direction. And Russell Kirk in 51 said, if we ever get a middle class that's more than half the population like FDR wants, you're going to see a couple of things predictably. You're going to see young people who are no longer respectful of their elders, and that's going to lead to the generational collapse of society. You're going to see women who no longer understand their place in the family, and that's going to lead to the destruction of the family. And you're going to see minorities who are demanding equal rights and equal pay with white people on an immediate basis. And that will cause such social disruption that the country will go down in flames. And by and large, in 1951, while Barry Goldwater got all excited by Russell Kirk's writings, and William F. Buckley, in fact, in 54, writing about Russell Kirk in the National Review said, white people are genetically superior to black people. We are the advanced race, all this kind of stuff. They were pretty much considered crackpots at that time in the 50s, Buckley and Goldwater and Kirk, because the country was doing just fine. And, the biggest controversy was whether Elvis was swinging his hips too much. Then came the 60s. And in 1961, the birth control pill was legalized. So by 1965, you had a full-blown women's movement. Now that women had control of their reproductive capacity and they could participate in the workplace on an equal basis with men. You had the peak of Martin Luther King's civil rights, the modern day civil rights movement, and you had cities across America that were in flames. In every single case, it was the result of a police officer brutalizing an unarmed black person, but they were in flames nonetheless because black people were saying enough. And then on top of that, you had young people like me, getting arrested in anti-war demonstrations, burning draft cards, saying, hell no, I won't go. And at that point, the Republican establishment, right around 66, 67, looked around and said, holy crap, Russell Kirk was right. Brink, Goldwater, William F. Buckley, they were all friggin' right. And we've got to do something about this. We've got to cut this middle class down to size, because if we don't keep going, we're going to have a big, big problem here. We're going to end up like the Soviet Union. You're going to have the socialist republic. You're going to have the people running the show instead of the leaders. And that's the mandate that Ronald Reagan came into office with in 1981, when 2/3 of us, 65% of us, were in the middle class, was to cut that middle class down below 50%, to save the country. These guys genuinely believed, many of them, that they were trying to save the country, to undo this horrible experiment that had never been done before, that was resulting in all this social upheaval. People like me, in my generation, we saw all these, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement. We saw this as the birth of a new America. We saw this as just the birthing pains, and something cool was going to come out of it. They saw it as the end of society. And so when you understand that that's been the animating force behind the Republican Party, and certainly behind the official old school Heritage Foundation, Cato Institute, right-wing billionaire Koch brothers kind of view of America, then suddenly everything that they're doing starts to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I used to constantly invite conservatives to come on my program and debate with me, because I just wanted to blow that bubble up, and I wanted to get them to restate it, and they did over and over and over again. I had Kash Patel on the program. I had Dan Bongino on the program. We had a whole bunch of these people on, and I think that it's important that we revisit that whole conversation about, is a middle class a dangerous thing? How do we get back the middle class? I mean, we're now down to 47% of us. Some say 43% of us being in the middle class. And at that, it takes two paychecks to equal the same middle class lifestyle that you had in 1981 with a single paycheck. Over $50 trillion has been transferred from the pockets and the houses and the savings accounts and the pensions of working class people into the money bins of the top 1% over that same period of time. So we've got to do something about that. And that's the work of PDA. That's the work of the progressives within the Democratic Party. And that's the work that I'm committed to and that I think we all need to be working on.
And the book is The Last American President by Thom Hartmann, and we have links in the chat to pick it up. And of course, you can pick it up at booksellers wherever available. Of course, this is a mass distributed book and not hard to find at all. The Last American President, A Broken Man, a Corrupt Party, and a World on the Brink by Thom Hartmann. Check him out at thomhartmann.com. A daily radio show, 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. Your stamina is amazing, unbelievably amazing. And it's an honor to have you here, Thom Hartmann. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Alan. It was great to be here, and great to see all the folks who showed up, and William and Donna, and I'm forgetting
Hartzell.
Yeah. Thank you for the conversation. And
thank you so much. And what we're going to do here now is Hartzell come forward. Everybody's on stack. We're going to go to family time. We're going to go back to the queue, even maybe before family time. Let's though go quickly to Hartzell, then to Mike Fox with our PDA to-dos. I just want to bring Hartzell forward because we're a little later in the hour. We want to get our PDAs to do done. But while we have Hartzell on, and it just takes a second to donate. I want to. Should I let people know a little bit about who's endorsed you this past week, Hartzell, or do you want to make the announcement yourself?
Well, I was going to make the announcement. In fact, here's the thing. In fact, if it's okay, I need everyone on this call to maybe keep a little secret, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because what we're doing tomorrow is the public rollout of a tax policy. So I got a few breaking news, my friend. We're going to be breaking out a tax policy that, my friends, I'm not kidding you, it is the most progressive tax policy of any congressional candidate, perhaps not just this cycle, but in recent memory. And it's inspired by the work of the Freedom Budget, Dr. Martin Luther King and Bayard Rustin. And I have some incredible folks on our team who have just Hanya, are you on this call? Hanya's on. I mean, it's so wonderful. Can't wait for y'all to see it. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And we are putting together that policy in the spirit of someone who has decided to endorse our campaign. He is someone who very much is a friend of PDA and a champion of economic populism. Ro Khanna. Congressman Ro Khanna has endorsed my race in the Missouri's 4th District. So it's been great. And don't forget, my friends, that the very first endorsement started with our brothers and sisters right here on this call, PDA. So it has been just really awesome. We also secured the endorsement of our local DSA chapter, KCDSA, which is after New York, one of the quickest growing chapters in the country. So over 500 dues paying members. So it has been just a really encouraging time. Momentum is high. And I just feel really good. So, hey, we're announcing all these things tomorrow and in the coming days. So you didn't hear this now, but you definitely heard this now. So
Well, you haven't given the details. I imagine people might be able to intuit the direction of your tax policy, but the tax policy is also very, very interesting in nuanced points and
when
detail.
we say, my brother, that we're going to tax the rich, we mean we're going to tax the rich.
Well, that is beautiful. It's much needed. It's gone way, 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 way out of whack. I don't know if people saw it this week, Hartzell and everybody here, but some statistics actually came out. We're not going to get a lot of them from the Trump administration about the second quarter GDP. And the rise in GDP was large, but that was in part because of the quirk of how they come up with that number in relationship to imports exports is part of the equation. And it wasn't that low, but in terms of who was spending money and earning money in our economy, the skewing, the exaggeration of concentration of the wealthy spending the money, and a collapse in the expenditures of the bottom 60% of the population was, I think they said it was like the most pronounced, I think maybe ever outside of like when the economy's in total collapse around a recessionary.
So you know what we should do with that?
Yeah.
Alan Minsky, it sounds to me like we should be taxing billionaires 100%. Wink, wink, nudge,
Yeah.
nudge, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Well, this
Make sure you check our socials in the coming days. Check social media, and also I want to make sure I give love. Also, again, it started with PDA, but also we picked up the endorsement of Politivist, which is Congresswoman Cori Bush, who we want to get back in that seat. It's her, inspired by her. She's not affiliated now, but she is the matriarch of that organization. So just want to say, that we got a movement behind us, brother.
Well, look at all these Missourians chiming in. Mike Thaler, PDA California, former Missourian, chiming in with a tax billionaires 1,500%, which sounds grand to me. And then, well, don't forget, Brink says there should be no billionaires, right? And there's no need
well, under a tax policy written by Hartzell Gray and an incredible team, maybe that is exactly what you're going to get, Alan Minsky.
Well, $999 million seems like an excessive amount of money to me, so I don't see any need for any billionaires. But yeah, and so this is fantastic. Now, Cori Bush, of course, another Missourian, and we'll be having her on the town hall soon. She's over in Missouri's first. Hartzell, just to clarify again, you are now running in what district?
We are running in Missouri's 4th. I am the front runner on the Democratic side. Our primary is August 4th. This is a time we really need to help build this movement, especially going into the holidays. It's a tough time. This is a grassroots campaign. We don't take any corporate money. In fact, I think I told this story already once on this call that the very first group that hit me up hadn't even publicly announced the campaign. This was back when I was running against Cleaver in the 5th before the gerrymandering. The very first person I got was a DM that said, "Hi, welcome. Excited about your race. I'm with one of the largest lobbying firms in the country. Would love to chat." And I'm saying, okay. And I sent it to Hanya and I said, okay, what is this? You know who it was? It was APAC.
Right.
Her name at apac.com. And the first thing we did after that, before we sent that thing to spam, was that we sought and we received the endorsement of APAC Tracker, who've done some incredible work, Track APAC. So again, everything has been so incredible, but we just need your support. We're going against a MAGA mouthpiece who doesn't believe a damn thing that we know we need. He doesn't believe in science, doesn't believe in reproductive freedom, doesn't believe in economic justice, doesn't believe that Palestinians' lives matter, or that they're even people for that matter. And this is a uniquely compromised candidate. He's a former Fox anchor here in town. I'm a former NPR host, which is a nice little storyline there. But he is someone who is so disliked that even in a district that where you would say maybe, I identify with MAGA. I actually like it. When you say MAGA Mark, I like that. But what they don't like is the fact that their farmland's getting bought up and their apartments, just like my apartments in downtown, are getting bought up by private equity, and that they're losing their ability to pay their energy bill because of data centers and AI. They know that. So instead of me calling him MAGA Mark, I can say Mark Alford didn't stand in the way of you being hosed. It's Mark Alford who had a chance to do something for you, had a chance to work for you, and did nothing. you know? And so I think that's a way, and also it's affordability, it is affordability. And you know what? On top of that, just to put a pin in all that, winning is done by winning. That's how winning is done. That's how wins generate more wins. Between Zoran's win, we had that incredible win in Seattle with the mayor. Afton is surging, and I think is going to maybe pull off one of the biggest upsets in the history of this country. You know, we've got the wonderful work of Senator and Sister Nina Turner. You know, we got Marianne Williamson on this call. We've got so many, Thom Hartmann, I'm stepping on the lead. And of course, you, Ellen Minsky. So I just think that there is a lot of collective brilliance on this call. And so if I can help bring this PDA wisdom to DC, just help me get there, folks. Just, you know, a couple bucks here and there, and we're going to make a moment, a movement, as we like to say in PDA.
Well, thank you so much, Hartzell. And right now, let's get into the chat right now from Hanya and Mike and me, the split donation, because we're going to pass off right now to Mike Fox with the PDA to-dos in a moment. Just hang in there for a second still, Hartzell. And let's get that split. Oh, I can almost get this right here. Let's see.
And I applaud myself for staying exactly on to time, right at the half-hour mark. I'm so proud of myself. Thank you, team.
Oh, you know, hey, man, you know how to do radio clocks, so there you go. And as does Tom and William.
There, Alan.
Okay, there we go. So everybody, just there it is. Donate there and donate what you can. We will, of course, every cent that we get in that's going to come through that channel at PDA, because it's a split donation, we are going to be spending and beyond on the Hartzell Gray campaign. And then the campaign itself will get the split half of it, and we'll be supporting a candidacy that I think has a potential to really win hearts and minds across the Midwest and across the country, and that's the candidacy of the great Hartzell Gray in Missouri's 4th District. Now, one final question for you. Afton's in the home stretch here, and Hartzell, you know, encourage everybody to donate to your campaign in this split, and then also to get on the phones and support Afton Bain, because the final 2 days we can win this thing in Tennessee's 7th.
This is going to shock the system. It's going to shock the world. At this point, I know I don't want to speak for Afton, but I know as someone who's in this kind of space now, I'm sure she needs folks to make a bunch of phone calls and maybe knocking some doors. And again, people power. The last time I checked, people power is undefeated, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, here, man. Look, you know, one of the things, the subtext of like my little conversation with Tom in the part that was after the top of the hour, and the question I asked, you know, yes, in MAGA, they're calling for, there's a lot of it has to do with race, the history of race, white supremacy in America. But there's a major component for everybody in it, and a particular subset of the movement that maybe aren't drawn in by the racism, that America was going towards being a middle-class society in the post-war period. And I think everybody does know that phrase, which he picked up from Reagan, of making America great again, now, 30 years after Reagan, 40 years after Reagan, 45 years after Reagan, America, that middle class has been torn apart. They want to see and live in a middle class society, and it's your policies, it's Afton's policies, not the Republican Party's policies, that are the only policies that can achieve the building of an American society, and then we will put it onto an anti-racist path, an inclusionary path, one with equity and
I have 30
economic
seconds?
and social justice. Take it away, Hartzell.
One final beat in this, which is actually kind of a call to action. One of the stories I remember seeing early on in the Trump administration, when he took away all those things that all the benefits, especially when it came to agriculture and the IRA. And there was this local farmer who voted for Trump 3 different times, and he actually decided under the Biden administration to take these subsidies and invest it within his farms. He did all this clean, green tech. He took a chance, right? And so it was Trump who rescinded and took all that away. And he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. This, you know, strong, burly white man is crying his eyes out. And here is my call to action for everyone on this call, because what he took away from that was that he's never going to do business with the government again. But it's incumbent on us to tell him, no. It wasn't the government that did you. This was the oligarchs that did this. Because you know why they took that money from you? Because they gave it to the billionaires for a tax cut. You know, and so it is on us now to make those connections. And it's a class argument that, again, this is how we win. We bring our folks together. And I think that our moment is now. The window is so open, y'all. So let us be those folks that help bridge that gap and change the hearts and minds. And that's how we win. That's how we win.
Thank you so much, Heart So Great. Again, donate on the Split campaign. Get on the phone, support Afton Bain. Get ready to tell everybody around the country about Heart So Great's campaign in Missouri's 4th. And man, you are a great candidate. You're gonna be a great member of Congress, Heart So Great. It's an honor to
Love you,
work with
brother.
you. And Mike Fox, why don't you come forward with our PDA to-dos? And yeah, let's do that now, and then I'll come back, put a ribbon and bow on it, and we'll go to family time. So Mike, take it away.
Cool. Real quick, no camera. I'm showing solidarity with all of our participants whose video been turned off, and we didn't explain that at the top. Real simple, gang. Zoom bombers. That's the problem. So solidarity, and I've got my favorite job of the week here. I want to thank the following people who have donated today: Lori and Michelle, Judith, Sydney, Dr. Deutsch, double dipping phone banker Dr. Deutsch, and Marie and phone banker Heather double dipping, and my phone assistant Mary double dipping, and Carol double dipping, our phone banker West Virginia chapter head, and more. And thank you, Leslie and Sydney and Anthony and Susie. Oh, Susie Shannon. Thank you so much, Susie, for your more than kind $100. If anybody can match or beat Susie, I'll show solidarity with you on that. And Maria and Walt and our chapter head in Tampa, Linda. Thank you, Linda, and Joyce and Janet for your monthly, and Patrice, Deborah, Berta, Catherine, Neil, Titi, Cheryl, Tim, Patrice, Meredith, phone banker Patricia, Sharon, Mary Jo, Maxine in Florida, and phone banker Michael, and Mary Ellen, and Darwin, phone banker Aaron double dipping, phone banker Erica double dipping, Carol, Don, thank you for your more than kind $250, Dr. McCann. As always, you inspire. And gang, if as a group, that's my next goal. As a group, we show solidarity with Dr. McCain, and we're going to match Dr. McCann's $250 by coming together as a group and making it happen. $5 each, we could make it happen. And Carla and Joanne, phone banker Betsy double dipping, Margaret and Daniel and phone banker Mary Ellen, and Dr. Deutsch again, he's triple dipping officially. And Neil and Dorothy, thank you for your more than kind $100, solidarity sister. Mary double dipping again. And Mark, Dr. Sonnenborn out in California, phone banking, double dipping. Jane up in New York, double dipping. Tina, Debbie, Dr. Deutsch again. Dr. Deutsch is on fire. And Mary, phone banker Mary, double dipping. Carol, there's Carol again. And finally, Michael, who starts our every Sunday, Michael, up in Chicago with your more than kind and consistent $5. Thank you, brother. That's the wonderful news to this point. Let's keep that going. I'm still 9 phone bankers short on the goal for this call. So pdamerica.org/volunteer, nail that. I'm going to toss into the chat one more time. Pile on big for Hartzell and double dip. Bang, there it is. Toss in an hour for Afton. And let's absolutely have the phones on fire, as well as 100% solidarity. Toss in $1 if you can. And we'll be back at it during family time here. Back to you, Alan.
Well, we're going to go pretty much straight to family time, Mike, here. So we'll be back at that. I do want to say just a couple things, though, just for the PDA family. Fantastic turnout. Let everybody know about these town halls. Obviously, we have some high-profile guests coming up. I do also want to say, though, that this event that we'll have on December 11th, it'll be not a Wednesday, a Thursday evening. It won't commence until 9 o'clock Eastern because it's out here in Los Angeles. In fact, having it from 6 to 9 and not starting it at 7 is because we do want to have people be at least able to see the beginning of it in the East Coast. We also still want to be able to attract a crowd. It can be tough in Los Angeles to get people to a place at 6 o'clock because people prefer a little later because the traffic can lessen up after 6:30 in terms of LA traffic, a thing that Los Angelinos are pretty conditioned to try to avoid and not get caught in. It's going to be at the United Teachers of Los Angeles headquarters, and so that's even going to echo the Progressive Central we had in Chicago, which of course was at the Chicago Teachers Union. Now, a DNC meeting is not like the DNC in Chicago. The whole of the Democratic Party doesn't come, so can't have all those Congress people who participated in Progressive Central. They won't be any closer to Los Angeles than they normally are. So, and there's we will certainly have some people who will contribute remotely, but obviously the kicker is to get a couple panels with people in place. That is the plan. We're in Los Angeles, and of course, you'd rather have those drawn on live people. It can be pretty clunky to do panels with people who are coming in through Zoom, and even then, you can really only have one extra person participating that way. That would be visible to the audience along with the live panelists. So this is not the kind of like the whole, the entire cosmos of Democrats and progressives all in the same city at the one time. It's not like that at all. But it is going to be very focused in what the progressive movement is about in two ways. Policy, of course, right? I think it's very important for a movement like ours that hasn't had, in a sense, been in control of the U.S. government, arguably ever, but at least for many, many decades. And of course, we have, in the way we're framing it, from Roosevelt really through and domestic policy through the Johnson administrations. And of course, the Roosevelt order, the New Deal order, was dominant in America from about 33 to 80. And in many respects, our call is to reinvigorate that tradition. Of course, there's ways in which we would want to improve upon even what it was in those days. But to clarify what that is, how we get there from here, how there's no barriers to it. These kind of policy societies organized around these policies still exist, and in most respects, in terms of social welfare indices, they do much better than the United States. The only indices in which the United States ranks higher than, say, 19 or 20 other liberal Democrats who are still organized centrally around the kind of New Deal-esque strategy. I mean, neoliberalism has chipped away at the degree to which they are firmly grounded in them, but none of these countries have reversed universal single-payer health care. And the only indices in which America ranks above them, for the most part, are their wealth and aggregate wealth indices. There's a lot of money and a lot of wealth in the United States. Of course, the other indices would be military dominance. But if you accept that the size of one's prison industrial complex is a negative, not a positive, the size of the police force, the arms in the police force, those are not positives, those are negatives. The United States ranks very low. And this is not the way to organize a society. That's much better for the domestic population to organize it along the lines of what FDR set out to do. And it was followed up by whatever you want to call them, social democrats, democratic socialists, across these other prosperous liberal democracies. There's no barriers to us achieving these here in terms of the fact that the application of these policies to American society will, in fact, improve them if they are not undercut by things like capital strikes or, very concentrated resistance on behalf of the power elite and things like that. So we have to make the case of what this means, be succinct about it and focused. And then the second wing of it is the contemporary Democratic Party, which of course will be in town. And I think we have to have a panel that really lays out for people how it is that we cannot be impeded from achieving the social transformation that Americans want. And we see that from the Medicare for All poll. That will improve society. We honestly believe that is the case. There's nothing nefarious about what we're proposing. This is all done as a proposal for social improvement, that it can be achieved, and it can be achieved in our two-party system with enough organization and appropriately structured organization to deal with the Democratic Party as it really is. So that's what we'll be talking about on December 11th. Again, we just confirmed the space before the long holiday, the only 4-day annual holiday we have in the United States, which is Thanksgiving week. And but John Nichols, Ro Khanna, and other people will be signing on. And of course, we should have exceptional people participating from Southern California. We'll have members from the YPDA steering committee there. Jaime Jodette Barnes, William Walker, There's rumors that some candidate from Missouri 4th may be around as well. So it's going to be a great event, and let everybody know about it. And I think it's going to be an important moment where PDA can, again, like we did with Bernie, really present ourselves as a very unique organization because we combine really setting what is a sort of clear consensus in the progressive community about national policy, but also being unique in the way that we engage the one institution that can defeat fascism in the country, that we do have to accept we're inside this political structure of the two-party system, and that is our relationship to the Democratic Party. It's very frustrating at times to engage the Democratic Party, but there are no other options on the table, and there certainly are not when the alternative is fascism. As critical as people have been of the Democratic Party, we see the Democratic Party winning elections all over the country. That's because people just understand that what is truly unacceptable right now is to strengthen the hand of the fascist Republican Party. So all that is coming up. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Mike Fox for family time. Stay on if you have a question. Mike will get to you in the queue. And I just, of course, want to thank Hartzell Gray, Donna Smith, Mike Fox, the entire PDA support staff, William Walter, Jim Langford, Mike Olas, and Susan Gilbert that help out every week. And of course, I want to thank Louise Hartmann and the great Thom Hartmann. And it was just an absolute pleasure to talk with Thom. He really is just an amazing public and intellectual and political resource for our society. It's hard to call somebody a resource, but he's just, his thinking about America, his understanding of American history, the structures of our laws, the structures of the structural institutional organization of our society, and how to navigate them. He's a real beacon for our time. So it was an honor to have Thom with us today. And thank you, Greg and Marianne, for joining us too. And I'm sure we'll create a manner to hear from you both very shortly. And Mike Fox, that's it for this week. We'll be back again next week with another PDA Town Hall on December 7th, same time. And Mike Fox, take it away. Take us into family time.